who do you say that I am? That's the perennial question, isn't it? And when I was asked to give a reflection for today, a choice of this or another day, and I picked this one, and then I thought, oh my goodness, why did I do that? Because there are so many issues to deal with here, but we'll jump in. People who look at the structure of Mark's gospel pretty much agree that this passage is the turning point. That before this, yes, there's been some opposition, but Jesus has pretty much sailed along, enjoying his power and authority, and now he begins to talk in a very different way. And from here on, it will lead inevitably toward Jerusalem and the Passion. There are three parts to this lectionary selection. The first one, Jesus' question, leads to Peter's declaration of, "You are the Messiah." And the second one, Jesus begins to teach about his own destiny, and then you get Peter not liking the idea and trying to dissuade him. And the third then is the teaching about the cost of discipleship, where suddenly there's a crowd. It's a more public kind of thing. Now, first of all, if you're not aware of this, Jesus gets around in Mark's gospel. He travels more than in any other gospel. Behind me, by the way, is the Lake of Galilee, where he spent a lot of time. But last Sunday's gospel was the end of chapter 7. That's the famous line where he's going from Tyre to the Lake of Galilee by way of Sidon and the Decapolis. And I looked at a map of the East Coast, and it's sort of like going from Baltimore to Richmond by way of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. It's not on the way. And so we're talking about a sort of a very circular travel here. And you might think, well, that's Sidon, Tyre and Sidon are way up north on the Phoenician coast. And so this is also north. Caesarea Philippi is in northern Galilee. Okay, so he's just coming right down. No, because in between, you've got a scene at Bethsaida that's on the lake. So he and the disciples are going up and down, up and down. And the other thing that's kind of fun to do, if you ever want to, is get a map that you can draw on of first century Palestine, and read Mark's gospel and note every time he crosses the lake, and just draw a line across the lake. And you're going to find out you've got all of these lines going across the lake. So this is a really good example in this passage too, about they're traveling around. So they're way up north in the territory of Herod Philip, one of the sons of Herod the Great. The kingdom of Herod the Great was divided up. And Herod Philip got this northern part and built his own city dedicated in 14, so just something like 20 years before Jesus and the disciples are there. And the original name of the place was Paneas, because it's in a beautiful area. It's rocky. It's in the foothills of Mount Hermon. Springs, there's a beautiful waterfall, quite different from the dry, flatter area further south. And he named it Caesarea Philippi, that is after Caesar, Augustus, and the one of Philip, to distinguish it from Caesarea Maritima, which was this huge urban concentration on the coast, on the Mediterranean coast. So that's why it has a new name. It's a new place. There's a big cave there, sacred to the god Pan. That's why it's called Paneas. Pan, the sylvan god. There was a big temple in front of it. And the sources of the Jordan are up there. So for a sort of a composition of place, think about hilly and wooded and with streams, not at all the dry land that you get further south. And this part of it is named, the ancient name was Galanitis. And if you listen to the first three consonants there, GLN, you get Golan. And it is just about 2 miles over into the Golan Heights today. just on the edge between Israel and the Golan Heights. And note that Jesus goes to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, which means the outlying villages, not the city itself. It's also notable that Jesus seems to avoid cities except for Jerusalem. He is never depicted as going into Tiberias or Sepphoris, which were the two big cities in Lower Galilee. And here again, he's in the villages, not in the city. But it is this beautiful place, and maybe they're taking time off to escape the heat from Lower Galilee. Maybe it's vacation time for them, who knows? But this scene takes place along the way. And Jesus puts to them that question, who do you say that I am? Who do other people say that I am? And because he's known now as a powerful miracle worker, there are some who are thinking he's John the Baptist come to life, back to life, or that he's Elijah, or he's one of the prophets, sort of reincarnated, And yet, Jesus pushes that question to them. Now, the traditional interpretation of this has been that Jesus knew exactly who he was, and he's testing them. He wants to see what's going on with them. And of course, Peter comes through by saying, you are the Messiah. I was talking recently to someone who teaches parish Bible courses. And she said, everybody in the class, these adults of course, think that Jesus was God, he knew he was God, and so therefore everything was easy for him. Well, maybe they're reading in the Gospel of John a bit into these other Gospels. Actually, that's heretical, to think that he did not have human experiences. And if you're human, you can't possibly know everything is going to go on. It doesn't work that way. So if we try to imagine rather a human Jesus, we would come up in a different way. There was a lot of controversy about this, of course, in the early church. And in 451, the Council of Chalcedon came out with a classic formula about fully God and fully human, and two divine natures not mingled, etc. And we're still trying to figure out what that means. We don't know. But the Orthodox position on that is he was also fully human. And so it's been suggested, rather than Jesus knowing what he's talking about and testing them, he wants to know because he's trying to figure it out himself. And so they're telling him what they think is going to help a great deal for him to figure out what's actually going on. And if you take it that way, then Peter's answer is scary. You are the Messiah. Oh, is that really possible? Don't tell anybody, and it kind of explains that reaction of not wanting to tell anybody, which happens several other times in Mark's gospel, and it's known as the Messianic Secret. It's pretty distinctly Mark, and there much ink has been spilled in past times about trying to figure that out and try to explain it. And today, the Markan scholars are not too exercised about it, but there is that theme, and this is one of the places where Jesus is charging them not to tell anybody about this identification of him as Messiah. When he begins then to talk about the suffering and death, he says that quite openly. So there's a contrast there. Now, don't read Matthew into Mark here, because this is the place in Matthew 16 where Jesus says, well, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Blessed are you, says Jesus. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. Again, giving you the keys of the kingdom, and nobody will withstand it. That's Matthew. That's not Mark. Mark here is quite simple, quite stark. Peter recognizes that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, same thing. This kind of eschatological figure. Some years ago, there was an edited volume called Judaism and its Messiahs. There was no one clear idea of who a Messiah was supposed to be, but certainly this identification ties Jesus in very much with that whole tradition. Now, part 2, the first of 3 predictions of the Passion. He began to tell them that the Son of Man, and we'll get to that in a minute, must suffer, be rejected by the religious establishment, be killed, and rise again. And of course, they don't understand that at all. Now, first of all, the Son of Man. Yeah, this is an expression that has appeared already twice in Mark's Gospel in chapter 2, in which the Son of Man has authority over the Sabbath and to forgive sins. And undoubtedly, the origin of this is in Daniel 7, chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. And if you don't have that right at your fingertips, it's worth looking up, because it's a heavenly vision in which Daniel sees this ancient figure sitting on the throne who is pretty much a God figure, but then he sees this other figure. He says it's like a son of man. And that's it's a very difficult title, because sometimes it's translated the human one, and that's a good translation for it. It simply means someone who belongs to the realm of whatever is after the of. Sons of light, sons of darkness, Son of God, Son of Man. So in this heavenly vision, Daniel sees a human figure, a male human figure, to whom all power and authority is turned over. And he's coming on the clouds. He appears in this vision on the clouds. So we have this mysterious figure in Daniel, who is undoubtedly the source of all of the Son of Man references in the Gospels. And it's really interesting that after the Gospels, this title simply disappears in early Christian literature. But you take it as a glorious figure, you see? But here, quite different. Here, it's the Son of Man who is going to be the one who suffers and dies and rises. And after this, in chapters 9 and 10, there are 2 more of these teachings about what's going to happen, about the dying and the rising. And in each case, he must suffer and die and rise. Now, the arrest scene in Mark 14, Jesus is arrested. He stands before the high priest. He is saying nothing in answer to the questions. And the high priest says, I adjure you, are you the Messiah? And he says, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And he says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man, which is not what the high priest asked him at all. You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. And reference right back to Daniel. So in Mark's Gospel, we have, remember, Son of Man is an eschatological figure, but a human figure, one of us, one who belongs to the human realm. And he is both powerful and also vulnerable. And that's kind of the irony of the portrayal of this figure in Mark's Gospel. There has been some question about whether Jesus speaking in the Gospel really intends the Son of Man to be himself or to be somebody else, but I think it's pretty clear that it is himself. Peter doesn't want to hear it and takes Jesus aside and scolds him. for talking like that. And of course, Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satana. You don't understand the ways of God." Now, Satan, he's not suggesting that Peter is demonic, but rather it's the figure of Satan as the opponent, the one who stands in the way, the trickster, the obstacle. And what he's saying is that Peter here doesn't understand, and therefore he's an obstacle to Jesus following God's will. And we come to part 3. Now suddenly we have a crowd with the disciples. You got the impression before it's sort of Jesus and the disciples, and they're in this little group, and now suddenly Jesus says to the crowd. So there's a crowd that is gathered. And he says, "Whoever wants to come after me, there's a price to pay." So if you imagine other people, sort of outsiders, sort of coming closer now, and the disciples are this little inner circle, and Jesus says, if you want to join them, there's a price. And the price is losing one's own life, taking up the cross. And there's been debate, of course, there's always debate about whether sayings attributed to Jesus in the gospel really said by Jesus, and could this have been said before the crucifixion? And probably not. This is probably the taking up one's cross is probably, in retrospect, once the historical events have happened. But there's no discipleship without the cross. I mean, that's the point. And that seems to be a lesson learned, with or without religious faith, by anyone who's had the rug pulled out from under them. Whether it's loss of home, forced immigration, destruction of home, of family, of loved ones, and on a day like this, wow, we certainly know that. A loss of physical or mental health, or even a loss of a sense of identity. And anyone who has been on that kind of a journey knows that the only way forward is to let go of what has been. And that's that losing of life as we know it. One could certainly apply that to the whole crisis of the earth today as well, that we're going to have to lose part of life, the life we have known, in order to go forward into something else. And in all of those cases, what seems like losing life, we discover eventually is gaining it. These 3 predictions of the Passion are followed in Mark 10 by another saying that's very central to this whole theme, I think. And that is in Mark 10, 41 to 45, where he says that the Son of Man, here it is again, has come not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom. Quite problematic use of that word, ransom, because it implies kidnapping or something that has to be bought back. But that's not what I want to focus on here. It's the giving of one's life. We certainly, again, on today, remember those who lost their lives and those who laid them down by going back into that building, those buildings. So this theme is set for the Markan disciples. It's very characteristic of Mark's gospel that if you want to have resurrection, you have to first have the suffering, the denying of oneself, we trivialize, or at least we used to in some spirituality, trivialize self-denial, giving up chocolate cake for Lent. But it's something much, much more profound than that. It is this this laying down of everything that we think we have to have in order to survive, only to find that that was all a mistake, that we are led somehow into new life. This is Mark's understanding of Jesus and discipleship. And there are no easy answers or explanations. Just as there are, for what we commemorate today, no easy answers or explanations. But if we are willing to enter fully into the life that we are being called to, we will come to the best thing comparable to resurrection in this life, and that is new understanding, new life, ultimately leading toward something beyond this life. So let us embrace the mystery.